Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Quick Snaps. This one's a little offbeat. Costaki had the idea to basically interview me about You Lucky Dog Productions and all the inner workings. It took some doing, but he convinced me to do it. Yeah, it was kind of a fun conversation. I was only a little bit squeamish. But, yeah, I think you'll enjoy it if you're into comedy and want to know about what's going on with my comedy record label. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you're staying safe and quarantined. This corona thing is weird. Costaki did some gig plugs off the top that I had to take out because obviously things are changing rapidly, and you could just go to Costaki.com for updated info on gigs that are probably canceled, but who knows? Who knows? Buy live at Acme, maybe, because Costaki's losing a lot of money. My day-to-day hasn't changed too much so far, but I've had one recording canceled so far, and probably another. It'll probably get worse, but, hope you're safe, hope you're doing well, and hope you're enjoying all this football news that's coming out, and we'll have a more football-specific episode coming out soon. Enjoy!
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome into a very special episode of Quick Snaps, Comedy Football Talk. I'm Costaki Economopoulos, and I am about to interview Aaron Hodges.
Wow, good get.
About his... it's a big get. It's a big get. Mark Schlereth is quaking in his boots, feeling like he's about to be replaced. Let's do a quick gig plug and then dive in here.
Sure.
I have a bunch of crazy good gigs coming up, more so than I usually do.
Good for you.
More so than the usual high bar.
Corona alert. Corona alert. Gig plugs have been edited. Some have been rescheduled and canceled. Please check Costaki.com for updated info. Costaki.com for all your Costaki needs. Stay safe, stay healthy. Fuck off, Corona.
I'm so dumb for not knowing this.
Costaki.com for all the tour dates.
Yeah. Henry Phillips. Why did that escape me? He's great. In fact, I just had lunch with Henry Phillips this week. So Henry Phillips, famed for several things, among them Henry's Kitchen, like this sort of spoofy thing he does on YouTube. Which he's doing great with, by the way.
He's a chef?
Side note. He basically had a viral video in 2011 where he sort of did this like 4-minute thing where he was like kind of making fun of cooking shows because he watched them like all day long for a few days in a row.
Sure.
And now he does it regularly. He has a thing called Henry's Kitchen, and it's sort of Henry at home, kind of screwing up and cooking stuff for himself kind of thing.
Fun.
Yeah, it's actually really well done. He's a filmmaker. He's the one who did Punch in the Clown, and so he knows what he's doing. Anyway, Henry and I will be doing Weston, Wisconsin and Wisconsin Rapids at the beginning of April. I'm going off to Spokane after that, to the Spokane Comedy Club. Then I'm doing Joker's Comedy Club in Richland, Washington. May includes Lansing and Wabash, Indiana, and Anderson, Indiana. Those are with Bob Zaney. Danville, Illinois is on tap. Cincinnati, Ohio.
Jeez, man, you are busy.
Oh, yeah, that's all this side of June. And then the summer there'll be some more stuff as well, including Laughing Gas Comedy Club in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. That's a newish club. It's got a lot of heart. I love that guy. I talked to him for quite a while recently. Anyway, check all that out, Costaki.com. If you don't mind, I'd like to dive right in to our very special episode.
Lead the way, sir.
You, my friend, have a very interesting life, and I have a lot of questions for you. And so I pitched to you recently, why don't we just make this an episode about what you're doing? Now, we'll focus mostly on your professional life. You have an interesting life otherwise, but today I want to talk to you about your job. You are a comedy album producer. What's the phrase that you use?
I basically run a comedy record label and production company. That's the concise description.
I like it.
Yeah.
Now, you, just to give a little backstory here, you worked at Sirius for a full decade just prior to this chapter of your life.
Correct, yes.
And you, in a very noble way, left Sirius as you were working on my new album, so you didn't have this sort of...
a conflict of interest that nobody else seems to be concerned with in any other facets of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legit business concern for anyone with scraps of morals floating around in their bones.
Right.
And actually, you were. I will leave him unnamed, but somebody questioned that, and I was during this process, and I was very clear. I go, look, he's leaving on this day. The album comes out. He built the whole schedule around not having a conflict of interest on this.
Yeah, you were my escape plan, so then maybe that's where things started to go wrong.
So you did my your first album. Yeah, that's right. Your first album was my most recent album. We did Live at Acme together, and that was sort of your entrance into this world and your exit from Sirius. Where, by the way, just to give some more background, you did all kinds of things over the course of a decade at Sirius, including, and again, pardon me if I'm getting the language wrong.
That's all right.
You were essentially the creative director of Raw Dog, one of their big comedy channels, right?
In a way, yeah. There were some things that were above me that they forced me to put on the air, but for the most part, yeah. For as far as the stand-up and the sketches and the actual like comedy bits, yeah, I was programming that channel for a couple of years. You know, I had to do a lot leading up to that, but yeah, in a sense, I guess I was choosing what was getting played on Sirius XM, besides like a handful of specialty shows, some that I actually did advocate for and did like, and some that were thrown at me.
Right. That's the nature of any creative enterprise. You don't get to control all the parts. Right.
But the ones that were thrown at me were enough to kind of like push me out the door a little bit easier.
Right. But to me, again, I don't want to over gush, but I want to be honest at the same time. Like, to me, you're the perfect storm of things, because you clocked 10 years at Sirius. You know comedy forwards and backwards. You're a gigantic. Yeah. Just give me a second. You're a gigantic fan of comedy, and you've even done stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of editing, and you understand like the right length of a clip that Sirius is going to play, and you have connections over there. And you're easy to work with, and you offer a great deal. I mean, to me, you're a freakishly good comedy album producer.
This is just the boost I needed today.
So I'm fascinated by your life, because it's such an interesting thing. First of all, to have the balls to just jump off of a corporate ship that sends you checks, and you know what I mean? Like, to just go do your own thing is a daydream that most humans have, and they never fulfill it, right? So just doing that in any form of taking a swing and being your own entrepreneur and running your own thing is astounding. And to do it successfully in the comedy, in a creative realm, a very competitive universe, is even more impressive. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you some questions about how all this works.
Fire away, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with all of this and the gushing and all that stuff, but somehow you convinced me to do this. So
because you're a nice guy, that's why. Because you're a nice, modest, middle American, kind, menschy dude.
No,
compliments make you squirmy. That's why.
No, it's not even that. It's just that, like, sometimes I just don't feel like I should be speaking from any kind of position of authority or expertise, because I feel like I am still figuring it out as I go,
of course.
And there's so many mistakes that have been made and lessons to be learned still. So and that's fine. Like, yeah, okay. I guess I need to say that.
Well, fair. So let's frame it this way. This is two buddies hanging out, and I'm asking you all the questions that I've always wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
and we're just going to let it all hang out. And if there's something really egregious and awful or personal or money oriented that you want to edit out later, get the final edit. So in the meantime, I'm just going to ask you everything.
That's true. I guess I do have control over that, don't I?
Yeah. Final edit is an understatement at what you have in this situation.
All right, let it be known. Whatever comes out of this interview is my choice.
You literally edit it and then post it without checking with me to see where we are. So you control all this stuff.
Okay.
All right. You've got several albums under the label now. What's the actual number? Are we approaching 20? Where are you?
We're past 20. We're approaching 25 and getting close to 30.
Oh my goodness gracious, that was fast. Okay, so you're even ahead of where I thought you were.
Yeah.
It seems to the casual observer that your business works a little bit like tech stocks. Like,
how?
If you invest in 30 of them and 2 of them hit, you're great. Like it pays for all of the investments in the other 28.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
It seems like because you have. Let's back this up one more notch. You have significant upfront costs on all these things.
Sometimes I don't.
Oh, that's one of my questions. All right. So you just did Larry Bubbles Brown.
Yeah, which is actually coming. It's actually coming out at midnight tonight. I don't know if when people are listening, but yeah, that's coming out. Larry Bubbles Brown. It's got to get better. It's a great album. Larry's he's a local legend for sure in San Francisco Bay Area, and he came up with. Sorry, I just turned into company man now and got to plug it.
And you turned off modest man and you're promotion man.
No,
that's fair
because I'm bragging about someone else.
Yeah, that's good.
But he has been doing comedy for 30 plus years and never put out an album. He came up with like Robin Williams and Dana Carvey and all these people that were coming up around that time. As some of those people, like he's in a documentary. It's called Three Still Standing with him, Will Durst, and Johnny Steele are the main characters. But there's cameos from all kinds of people.
Oh, I love Johnny Steele. Underrated.
It's worth checking out. It's on YouTube. You can just watch it for free. Three Still Standing. But I mean,
Johnny Steele was the host when I did the San Francisco competition 100 years ago, and he was great.
So the premise is just like these are these old dogs in comedy that, are they ever going to make it? It's so hard out here, that kind of thing. So they kind of follow them around and just talk to several different comedians about what it is to be a comedian in this world. So it's interesting. It's definitely worth checking out. But a lot of those comics are like, yeah, Larry might be the funniest of us all. So he's a weird dude. Oh, I'm actually going to – there's a great football joke on the album. I'm not even going to try to recreate it, but maybe I'll plug it in here. As a promo for the album, go get it.
Oh, there you go. Look at you. How quickly you turned.
It's really good. It's one of those things, and this joke in particular, it has like a punchline that you couldn't call in a million years. And
that's a good compliment for a joke, yeah.
Yeah, like the word choice is like, it's nothing, like it's not groundbreaking. It's something like you might hear in everyday conversation, but there's no way you would guess that punchline. And that's the kind of shit that excites me, that I get it. Like when I hear that, when I go like, there's no way I couldn't call that. Nobody could call that.
Oakland Raiders are moving to Las Vegas. Interesting team. Oakland to L.A., back to Oakland, now to Las Vegas. That is the classic migratory pattern of someone trying to avoid child support. Is Daddy there? No, he moved. I'm hungry, man. These all end sadly.
Yeah, so he's coming out at midnight. And getting back to the costs, that one costs a little bit of money because we had to make a choice of whether or not I was going to fly out there and do the actual recordings myself or hire an engineer. And by the time we worked out the costs, where we recorded 3 different shows at 3 different locations. So I did the math and I said, all right, well, average engineer is going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of like $500 a show, or it might be a little less. It's not usually going to be a little more than that. But I said, all right, well, now we're talking about $1,500. I think I can fly out there and bring the equipment and do it even cheaper than that. So, yeah, it ended up being somewhere around that, $1,500. So, yeah, that's the money that you can sink into something. And I mean, that's $1,500 is pretty cheap, actually. But I mean, you could easily spend a lot more money than that.
Right.
And I mean, that's just for the recording and distribution and
but
all
you're
that
bringing
stuff.
your knowledge and your equipment and your wherewithal to. I mean, your opportunity costs and your travel expenses, and I mean all of that. That ends up being a pretty significant number, and we're not even touching the artwork and the distribution and all the other headaches. And you as the producer, are you taking on those upfront costs yourself, or are they part of a kitty that you're kind of share? Is he contributing? How does this typically work for you?
It goes a lot of different ways. Like I paid for it up front and then recoup it from like the sales and the streams. So whatever our split ends up being, I have to make that money back before we start splitting it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was my guess, actually, is how you did it. Okay.
And then, I mean, there's other ways. I mean, if the artist takes on some of the cost, then, we're splitting right away.
Right.
It's flexible. It's not a hard and fast model.
Right. But so that the listener understands what we're talking about, there's a lot of money to be made in royalties now. It's the last, I don't know, the last 10-ish years, this new, it's not new. I mean, it's something ASCAP has been doing forever, but the spoken word universe has caught up a little bit in terms of how they do distributions and royalties on things. When they play a clip of Live at Acme on Sirius, X amount of money goes towards paying the artist for that, and the producer gets a big chunk of that. And these are, sometimes many thousands of dollars on a thing by the course of the end of a year. So you got 30 albums in the universe, and you get 50 cents from this one and 20,000 from that. I mean, there's a big range on what could happen here. And so you're putting up a lot of upfront costs early and a lot of distribution work and tax efforts and keeping track of all this crazy universe that you're in. And then it's sort of, not to make it sound too passive, but it sort of becomes mailbox money, right? Most of your work and expenses at the front. It's an investment in a thing that could pay off lifetime quite a lot, and often doesn't, right?
Yeah, I mean, the game seems to be changing every day. There's a lot of people that have jumped into the small production company record label game even since I started about 3 years ago. I think there's at least like 4 companies that have popped up that I know of.
Right.
So I guess they saw me do it and they go, if this fucking idiot can do it, then anybody can.
Well,
so the competition is constantly there. I mean, and then there's on top of that, there's always new companies popping up on top of the big dogs that, they have a strong stranglehold on a lot of the facets of this industry. So it's constant competition and constant on my end. I'm constantly trying to figure out how do I do it better.
Right.
And I'm at the point now, excuse me, where I'm almost 3 years in, and I feel like I gotta evolve a lot. And in certain ways I am, but there's also certain ways where I'm lacking, and I just have to figure out how I can get better. And if sometimes, I don't know, there's a lot of things to consider, because my current deal is better than most, and I think like right now I've proven that I can do this. So
right.
Do I raise my percentage a little bit, or is that going to keep people from wanting to work with me? Because that's what's attractive, And then if I raise my percentage, then how am I justifying that? What am I doing differently? What am I doing better? What am I offering the comics that they can't get somewhere else?
Right.
So it's a lot of wrestling with that, and then it's like, well, maybe you get into a different kind of space where, I built this studio in my basement, so now I'm thinking about, do I want to bring people in that want to record podcasts? Is there a market in this area? I'm not even sure, but maybe that's another kind of income. So I don't know. I'm on the precipice of either greatness or great despair. I don't think there's any in between, man.
You just described being in business for yourself. I mean, every day has flashes of both of those, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's a lot to juggle. It feels like an everyday struggle for me. So,
right.
It's always yeah.
All right. I have many questions.
Yeah.
Well, you and I did it. It was first of all, we were buddies, and it was your first one. And I already sort of had a couple of the key components handled because my wife is a, professional photographer and has got a real good eye for design. So we did the cover, and I also had a good situation where I basically had the recording handled. Are you, going forward after that, are you involved in the cover art? Are you helping with that? Do they bring that to you? Do you suggest stuff? Is that completely their thing? Who's paying for that? How does that work?
It's really a case-by-case basis. Sometimes the comic already has somebody that they know, and they come with a concept already. Sometimes it's already done. And if not, if they're kind of just like, I just want to throw my hands up and whatever you think is good, you go ahead and do it, then I'm capable of doing some good work, but usually I'm going to have to hire somebody because I'm not talented in that arena. So usually I have to hire somebody. But more often than not, the comic is handling the cover art.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What about big names versus quality? What do you look for when you're picking a comic to be another album in your universe? You're thinking ahead of like, how is Sirius going to like this guy? Is this going to sing on Pandora? Like, what are your business goals when you're talking about working with a comic or not?
Yeah, I mean, most of them, the secret is out. Everybody knows that, you get played on Sirius XM, that pays way more than everybody. So that's often what's being prioritized as far as content and, where they want their stuff placed and where I want their stuff placed. It's always Sirius XM first. And then really, I don't know, as far as stature, I don't really concern myself too much with, like, I don't know. I think that might, like, the way that I look at things may have to change a little bit. That's part of my evolution here, I think. Because, like, to start with you, my first 3 albums were people that, I basically have a relationship with, that you may even call a friendship. So they're people that I was comfortable with, that, I could learn on the fly here. It was fine. And then we kind of ventured into a lot of compilation albums. So I started working with a lot of people. I was working with Emma Willman, and she was hosting these, I guess it's like a mixtape show, you could call it.
That's in my notes here to ask you about. Good segue.
It's called The Check Spot. So we were working with, 4, 5, 6 comedians at a time, putting out an album a month with like 5 different comics for almost a year. So that was kind of where my focus was. And I think intentionally I knew that would help build my network as well, because I was just working with so many other people. And some of them I was picking, but a lot of them Emma was picking too. So it was people that I didn't know. So it was just kind of establishing my wife's calling. Let me hold on one second. Hold on.
T-
Al? Can I call you back? Okay, bye. You still there?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry. So I was working with a lot of different people with the check spot, and I knew that that would kind of expand the network of people that I could work with, and some of them have come back, and I've worked with them on their solo albums. So like Casey Balsham, Christian Duran. Tom Cassidy is another one. He's coming out March 20th. Very funny dude. I know I'm gonna forget. Oh, Anjan Biswas. Some of these comics that I worked with on the check spot, I've continued to work with on their individual albums. So I think that worked out really well.
That's smart. I mean, you're almost doing a guest set, and if you get them some plays, then they're like, oh, this guy, this is great. I'm going to go do my album with him, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, I tried to be as easy to work with as possible, and I think it worked out for, not everybody got played, so,
right.
There's varying degrees of people that are happy with me or unhappy with me, and that's hard to live with, too.
Right, but so much of that is outside of your control. I mean, you have to understand that.
Sure.
It's a crazy maze that sometimes you get to the cheese and sometimes you don't. And that's not necessarily because you suck at running a maze. It's like,
give me the cheese, baby.
But right, I mean, am I right in sort of framing it that way? There's a whole machine between here and there, and not all of it's about what you do. That leads me to this other sort of. I guess it's a variation of what I already asked you. Like, I've always thought this about comedy club owners. What do you do? Like, take the two extremes. Do you book somebody? Are you willing to book somebody that you think sucks, but will sell tickets? And also on the other end of that, do you book comics that you think are geniuses that definitely aren't going to sell tickets? And how do you balance? I mean, to take the extremes. I mean, is that like if a comedy club might book Screech? You know what I mean? Or somebody like Andy Kindler. I mean, Kindler has gotten a little bit better at branding himself, and he's starting to sell some tickets. But Kindler was sort of he was my go-to example of like a brilliant comic, but not someone who's well-known or, is going to move the ball on ticket sales, right? And I've always been interested in those kind of creative decisions when you're running a business. And you, to a lesser extent, have the same problem, right? You must hear bits where you're like, this guy's a fucking genius, but I don't know if I can get him played anywhere, right? Do you have that problem? Or someone who has a little bit of a name and street cred where you're like, well, I don't really care for this, but I know it's going to work. Do you have those two extremes in your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's always a choice. I think... for the most part, I just try to go with people that I think are funny. Sometimes I have gone where I'm like, well, I don't know if I love it, but I think somebody does.
Right.
So I go like, all right, I'll give it a shot, see how it goes. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised by how well it does, and sometimes I'm disappointed because it just doesn't make any sense because... Sometimes I think that some of these albums are really good, and then it's like only like a couple tracks really take off, and then sometimes I'm like, I don't know how this one is going to be received, and that one is wildly successful, and I'm like, I don't know. I think,
right.
I mean, I'm at a loss because I think we're all slaves to algorithms in one way or another, and so that. Definitely, it already sounds like excuses that I'm making, but it's like I just don't know what we're doing in this world anymore and how to reach people. I don't know how to do it. I'm at a loss,
Right, that's
man.
the maze that I'm referring to. It's a crazy machine between here and there, and you don't even... Yeah. I mean, sometimes it makes no sense what lands and what doesn't, and what gets grabbed and taken, and what I mean, even in my own small experience with my albums, sometimes I'm like, that's the bit that gets all the plays,
Right? Yeah,
Like,
you're like, there's
what-
like 4 or 5 jokes that you have a lot of pride in, where you're like, these are my best jokes, and those are the ones that are like not as well received, and you're like, oh, they like that, basically a knock knock joke.
Yeah. I mean, within the range of whatever you think is your point system is, sometimes they play the 1 and the 2 and not the 9 or the 10. And
Yeah.
and that's true in any creative endeavor. I used to fax jokes to the Tonight Show for a little while, and sometimes they picked one and I was like, that's the fucking joke. I barely even wrote that down.
Yeah.
And other ones, I'm like, this is the joke. They're going to open the monologue with this. Never see it ever again. It's fascinating and intriguing to me, and crazy, and it's true in life too. I was, like, whatever. Like I talked to Henry Phillips this week about Henry's Kitchen, and I asked him the world's dumbest question, which is, what makes something viral? Because we're all fascinated by how this happens. And the answer is the most ethereal, fucking mushy thing possible, which is, I don't know. Like, I think kind of the stars aligned and I did something good, and it just had this resonance. And of course, you try to recreate that, and it usually doesn't work. It's fascinating.
Slaves to the algorithm.
All right, so you reference this, and that's my question for you, because you actually deal with these numbers. In the pantheon of places where comedians have their stuff played and royalties show up in mailboxes, what's the percentage of that that's serious?
Of the money?
Yeah. I have a number in my head, and I'm not going to say it.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, what do you think it is?
You know better than I do. I'm going to guess 91%.
I was going to say 90. Yeah.
It's a big percentage. It's almost all of it.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are the other platforms catching up? Pandora seems to be surging in this universe.
Yeah, Pandora's pretty good.
And I know Spotify and a couple of the other guys are doing more comedy than they used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like Apple Music pays more than Spotify. Spotify pays almost nothing. Amazon is still there a little bit.
Right. I forgot about Amazon.
Slacker Radio is sometimes surprisingly a lot of money comes in from that for some people.
Really?
Yeah, Slacker Radio is pretty good. One of my old bosses actually programs some of the stuff over there. John McDermott. He does.
I know John McDermott.
Yeah, you remember him.
John McDermott was the one that sort of initially, am I remembering this right? Sort of brought me into the serious universe to do the football jokes. Was that John?
Yeah, I believe he was the head honcho when you were introduced to the world. Yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
He liked it. He was always a big fan.
Yeah, he was really good to me. It's nice to hear that these humans that are sort of good to you make their way into another slice of the same, business universe. That's cool. All right, I got more questions here. I'll make sure I don't miss anything. Has Serious Play changed with the Comedy Central and Netflix channels? I feel like the way that it only makes sense because those are such gigantic brands in the comedy universe that Serious wants to embrace those. But it seems like you're shifting money from the middle and lower class comics to the ones that are already making bank. Right? I mean, if you have a Netflix special, you're doing just fine. You don't need the extra serious plays to pay your rent.
Yeah. But
not that that's anybody's problem, but comics. But it strikes me as that's moving the money up the chain, not down. Right?
Well, I mean, that's what it's always been about. This is America,
Yeah, right. No, I didn't mean that as I was suggesting they're doing something wrong. It just feels like there's a shift away from sort of the middle class unknown comic towards the top in those moves.
I'm out of the loop. I don't know what's happening over there as far as like what decisions they're making, but one thing that I do know, and that will always be true about SiriusXM, is that they care about big brands more than they do about people. So if they can attach their name to Netflix or Comedy Central or whoever the big dog is, then they're going to do it, and that's where they're going to put their priorities. So,
yeah, that makes sense business-wise. I get it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know how much that really affects the other channels, because I mean, people that are being played on Netflix, Comedy Central, they're people that are under that umbrella in one way or another, whether or not they put out a Netflix special or a Comedy Central half hour or a Comedy Central album, things like that. So, like, if you're not under that umbrella, you're not getting played on that station anyway.
Right.
So, basically, that leaves you Raw Dog, that leaves you Comedy Greats, that leaves you Laugh USA, that leaves you Jeff and Larry's Comedy Roundup, and that leaves you Kevin Hart's LOL channel.
Right. Which used to be the Jamie Foxx thing, right?
The Foxhole, but Jamie Foxx ain't the brand anymore. It's Kevin Hart.
Right. It's funny because Kevin Hart isn't even... He's not nearly as urban, quote unquote, as Jamie Foxx is in terms of style.
Nah, I don't know how you measure that.
Yeah, you cannot measure that. That's a good point. There is no machine that measures that.
Look, he's black and he's a huge star. That's what it is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. Of course.
So, but I mean, listen, I'm not saying he shouldn't have the channel. He's certainly like earned his stature in the business for sure. He's a great comic, and I think he's. I don't know. This isn't like anything to do with Kevin Hart, but I mean, yeah, sure, he is the new Jamie Foxx, I guess, in terms of like who's the biggest black comic, and you know those comics need a channel for sure. They're underrepresented if you're black or Latino, or it's kind of like a catch-all of minorities that get played over there, and I think it's necessary for sure. So
I agree. I'm just saying he's not Earthquake. And it's a different kind of. The flavor is different with Kevin Hart. He's a lot more mainstream. He's not really representative of sort of urban comedy in the way that it was initially sort of branded.
So he's too mainstream, is what you're saying?
No. I agree with everything you said. That Kevin Hart's great, and it makes sense that he's the face of that. It's a little more mainstreamy than what I envision that channel being. And again, that's just my vision as an outsider.
I would put Earthquake in charge of a channel in a heartbeat.
Yeah, right. He's more. Again, these are tricky words, but he's more branded as a black comic than a mainstream comic.
I call him Quake, though. We're buddies.
Of course, yeah. I've called him Quake for 20 years. He's from Atlanta. I used to watch Quake when I was an open micer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was the king of black comedy in Atlanta when I was kind of like an MC, and he would host the shows at Uptown. And the show, I'm not exaggerating, sometimes those shows were 3, 4, 5 hours long. And the structure of those,
Jeez,
it's
who's
the old...
sitting through that?
Very well-dressed black people.
Oh my God.
That's the short answer. So... Quake he did the old Boston style where he would host the show and headline the show and do big chunks of time in between all the comics. He was basically, it was Earthquake and then 20 dudes doing 5 or 10 minutes.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, he owned that place. He was the man. And he was really good at it. I mean, you would watch him and just, speaking for me, I would watch, he was just like a god. But he couldn't is the wrong word. He didn't try hard and succeed at doing the comedy like that in a mainstream club as much. He was very much specific to that sort of subculture of comedy, but man, he was the king of it.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific demographic in mind when you're crafting your material? Are you trying to reach a certain type of person? Or are you just... I mean, you're trying to relate and have people relate to you, so you must have an idea in your head who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think the default for most comics is to sort of think about your immediate friend circle, and you're kind of trying to be funny to those people.
Mm-hmm.
So for most comics, the general sort of path is you're talking to the demo that you are. It's the more natural choice, right? And so your references and your point of view and your life is what has resonance. And so people who have the more similar life are more likely to connect with you. That doesn't mean that whatever, a 21-year-old black woman couldn't find me hilarious, but that's not typically the demo that in my head that I'm talking to, right? And I think there's some comics who on purpose are kind of narrowing that to a specific thing that they're aiming for. And sometimes they make a choice to do it outside of their demo on purpose.
Okay.
You know, like the perfect example is the white dude who did all the BET shows for 20 years. What's his name?
Dr. Handsome John, or what's his name?
Handsome John. I forgot that name.
That's not.
That's
his
going
name.
way back.
That's not.
All
the
right.
name,
Well, that's
is
a good
it?
example too.
The amazing. What's his name? That's not it.
That's not the guy that I was trying to think of, but that is a good example.
Or like, I don't know, like the Michael Rappaport.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Take my buddy Tom. Tom and I were exactly the same demo. We're pretty much exactly the same age. We even look a little bit alike. We both grew up and did open mics in Atlanta. And Tom was fascinated with the urban comedy scene and became friends. He was good friends with Quake and the guy that ran the Uptown Comedy Club Corner, whatever the name of that club was. And so he ended up hanging around there. And he worked at it, and he would go up in front of 97% black audiences, and he ended up figuring out how to do it pretty well, because it's just a muscle that I don't work, so I'm not good at it. But I could get good at it. It's the same thing like if you've never done a cruise ship, you're not going to be good at doing cruises that first time. It takes a while. It's a different muscle. Or corporates or colleges or... You know, like I could be hilarious in Australia if I worked at it, but I just fly over there and do a couple sets. They're not going to really land yet because I haven't worked that muscle. So to me, the Black Club was just another one of those things that was different enough that it was something you had to try hard at being good at.
Gotcha.
I actually used to explain this to people. I went and backpacked and did a couple sets around Australia once, and I was shocked that it was more similar than doing a set at Uptown. Like I was literally on the other side of the earth.
It was similar to the Atlanta Club?
It was more similar to my regular comedy experience.
Oh, then right.
Doing a set at a bar in Melbourne was more similar than doing a set 20 minutes from where I grew up.
Isn't that fascinating?
In a black club,
yeah.
quote unquote, black club.
Because
that just... It separated itself as being an experience that had its own set of expectations. That it's not that they couldn't laugh at white people, and those same people, if they went to the punchline, could be great audience members for a mainstream comic. But in the umbrella of the Uptown Comedy Corner, there's a certain expectation about the kind of comedy that you're going to have in there, and when you're not that thing, they're not too thrilled with it being kind of infiltrating their universe.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could smell blood on you right away. I mean, they're like, this guy's never played basketball.
Right, of course. Yeah, me especially, because I'm not good at any of the things that they value the most. Like, I'm not big, I'm not great at improv, I'm not, doing characters. But, Tom got good at it, and Tom would go in there and kill sometimes. And I never killed in there. I pulled it off. I ended up going and working on it because they gave me a BET set because I was a writer. So I went and tried to figure it out, but I wasn't. It was never something that I was going to destroy it. Anyway, we're way off topic.
Bring it back to me.
Yeah, it is fascinating that there's so many different subcultures of anything, but of stand-up comedy. All right, so... Back to you. Do comics come to you now, or are you going to them? Or is it some crazy mishmash of sort of finding each other through the ether?
Right now, it's a lot of coming to me. It's a lot of recommendations. So friends of comics that I've worked with that are happy with me, they go, I'll talk to Aaron. And then we start a conversation, and then we decide whether or not it makes sense to work together. That's where it's at right now. To be honest with you, I don't have the luxury of being able to go out to the clubs right now and be searching for the next person that I want to work with. I'm drowning in work right now. So it's like, it's a good thing, but it takes up most of my time. I'm constantly trying to figure out what's the most important thing that I have to work on today. Right now, I mean, I don't see that changing for pretty much the rest of this year. I mean, I'll go to an album release party on Wednesday, and there's a few people on that bill that I don't know that I'll see for the first time, and maybe I'll like them, and maybe we'll talk. And so usually, like, the people that I'm seeing for the first time are people that are like involved in something that I'm already involved in. So it's not a lot of scouting right now, but there are some potential opportunities, and this is the other thing. I might start expanding the business, and I have to like restructure it maybe, where I may have some employees or regular freelancers that are working with me, whether it be out in San Francisco or elsewhere. So it may turn into that, where I actually am paying people to find me the next comic to work with. You know what I mean? So that's something that's on the table right now, because I'm trying to find people that are good audio mixers and engineers that know comedy and all that stuff, that can take off some of that burden off of me too, because ultimately what I have to do this year is become more organized, learn how to delegate, and be a better businessman.
Right.
I got the audio stuff down. I got it. I'm good. I can always get better. I know, and there's other aspects of that I want to explore, but it's not necessarily like comedy album related. There's just that's where my focus is gonna go for the rest of this year. But yeah, right now I'm not like actively out there looking for people. I actually had to turn some people down because I'm scheduled out for a long time right now, so it's good.
Aren't guys like, I'm not sure I've nailed this, but aren't guys like me and Brian Miller your best sort of, connective pieces into the universe? Because we work with you and like how you do with our album, and then we tell our friends, and isn't that sort of the best path to everybody? Pretty much, yeah.
I don't know what's going on with Brian. We talked for a little bit about doing an album, but kind of fell off. So I don't know what his plans are, to be honest with you.
Right.
Obviously, I want to work with him, but that's up to him. So I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Now, I've always been guarded about the money coming in to me from Sirius and other places, because it always feels like found money that might disappear someday. And again, without saying names, I have one particular friend who grew to depend on it, and one day it just disappeared.
Yeah, right.
And so I always have this sense of like, wow, this is so great, but this might be the last one, like, is Sirius going to be around indefinitely?
No, nothing's going to be around indefinitely. We're all going to die from the coronavirus. What are you talking about? Are you serious?
Very topical.
Yeah. This is all going to go away. That's the other thing. Like, I'm going to have to have this podcast thing, because Sirius is going to go away, and then there's not going to be a You Lucky Dog Productions. Like, that fear is there every day. So, like, I started this business that depends on this other entity to basically exist for me to be viable. And, we're all at the mercy of it, and they know it.
Right. And they want to exist, but they might not. It might not be within their control. Or maybe another rival comes along and does it even better, or a different sort of portal into royalty heaven is opened by some other crazy machine.
It's certainly possible. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It sure seems like they have a stranglehold on things right now, but things seem to change pretty rapidly sometimes. So I mean, it's hard for me to be shocked by any kind of development these days. So yeah, I don't know, man. It is one of those things. Like, I have the same mentality of like, yeah, this is cool now. Could always be better. But this is not gonna last for 10 years. That's what I tell myself. Like, yeah, you probably got 10 years, and then you got to figure something else out. Because I just assume that this isn't gonna last.
But there's always going to be some new, different media that has the same needs, and stand-up comedy is so convenient for, because it doesn't require this gigantic machine to exist of cameramen and writers and, producers, and it's just a one-man machine. It feels like a form that will survive the different media as we go forward, but yeah, you're right. I mean, we don't know nothing about nothing. That's what's kind of fascinating about it.
I mean, really, I can't speak on this as a complete expert, but what I think I know is that SiriusXM doesn't pay well because they're generous. SiriusXM pays well because the government told them to pay well.
Yeah, and because it's a business model that works for them.
Right.
They're not building any of that content. The stand-up stuff, they're just playing it.
Yeah, and I mean, There are organizations that, Sound Exchange is great, and there's all kinds of organizations that fight for the rights of artists and excuse me, and copyright holders. So there are people, in your corner as far as trying to get you the most money that you're entitled to.
Right.
But, I mean, You just never know how any of this stuff is going to go.
Right, that's right. All right, last question. What about other things that are under the umbrella of You Lucky Dog? Are you going to venture into the universe of live shows or video specials, or is that too far down the road as you're trying to power through your crazy list of shit to do? Did you envision that being a part of the story someday? What are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I do. Like video specials and more showcase stuffs, maybe putting together like mini tours, things like that. Those are things that I'd like to do. Excuse me. And that goes back to just me being able to delegate other things so I can concentrate on growing in different fields and aspects of it. So,
right.
Yeah, it's in the plans. It's a far-off plan at this point. I think this year is pretty much decided for me already, where I need to go and where I need to put my energy. So I definitely think that it's probably sooner than later. I just don't know. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got a hell of a foundation. To go from not doing this to doing this seems like the biggest step, and you've successfully made that step and many others since. And you get some, a handful of these albums and things get lots of plays. I mean, then you have a platform from which to build whatever you want, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing.
That's fascinating. That's why I wanted to interview.
I kind of have to take hold of all these things and just register it in my brain, because my inner monologue is kind of mean to myself sometimes. And I go like, well, relax, man. Like, everything's like, you've built this foundation. Don't screw it up. And you could just keep doing things that you like and enjoy, and things are gonna be okay. Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah, it's a good speech. Sure.
Jesus.
For all of us, yeah, right. All right, man. Anything I forgot to ask you? You want to say about this whole crazy process?
I don't know. You're the Charlie Rose here, buddy. I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the few beats and opening up your soul and your experience to let me poke around in there. It's fascinating. I love that you're doing it, and keep doing it and crush it, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I hope that this came off as somewhat hopeful.
Absolutely. Now, whatever those strings are that you pull from where you sit, where you get plays for people, pull a couple on the Costaki string, would you? Jesus.
The new stuff is getting played.
Is it?
Yeah, you should start seeing that pretty soon.
I should look closer. All right. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for pulling on the string then.
Hey, you got it, bud. You got it.
That's what I meant to say. Great talk, man. Let's talk again soon.
All righty.